Right, this is our little mini lecture here on Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. This is, and I'm going to actually, why don't I start us out here by reading something? This is essentially how the play begins. And I guess to give you a little background on how this would be staged. Pardon the mess here, I got to clean up behind me. um, Essentially, yeah, this I actually saw a terrific revival of this on Broadway in 2012. The great and unfortunately late is Philip Seymour Hoffman playing Willie Loman. God, he thundered away, threw himself into the role, and he um, he barely could take his bows at the end of the night. He was so exhausted. He didn't live, I don't think, another year. He's already having some problems. But it was an excellent revival, and they really tried to recreate the original stage setting for the great director, theater director Elia Kazan, who also directed, by the way, the original Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. Again, two of potentially three of the three or four of the two of the definitely top 10 and probably top 3 to 5 plays ever in the American canon. Anyway, the way they set up the stage would have been almost like they had the house where the Lomans lived in, where it's almost like a giant sort of cutaway dollhouse. If you've ever seen one of those, where it sort of opens up and you can just see all the floors, and you kind of move the little dolls and pieces around inside it. That's kind of how it was, and you can sort of see into the house. And the play, in this play, the past and present all kind of crash together. Willie, who's sort of has early onset dementia, is often sort of tumbling back into the past. And whenever he's talking about the past, like the wall, like the walls and everything, he just walks through walls and everything like that. Whenever he's in the presence, if he's leaving one room to go into the other, he actually walks out the door as if it were there, and then kind of walks around the room, and that's kind of how you get a little hint. It can be confusing maybe a little bit when you're just reading some of this stuff. But anyway, that was how this was put on, and it really was meant for the past he's constantly obsessing over, and the present he's trying to get himself through. We're all kind of coming crashing together for poor Willie Loman, and again, this is the sort of the tragic expression of the American dream. Willie Loman, and again, his last name is not accidental, right? Low man, he's the low man. He's in the rat race, and he's in a world, in an American world that has been sort of desacralized. The famous "God is dead," a quote from Nietzsche, and that's the moral code and the moral guidance that the real belief in Christianity used to sort of provide for people has sort of gone, and this has been kind of replaced with maybe in a macro sense, sort of Darwin and social Darwinism, with survival of the fittest sort, which by the way is referenced several times in the play. Right when we get to Ben, Willie's very successful brother who went into the jungle, right? A lot of jungle and came out of a millionaire. But Willie is sort of the rat caught in the rat race, right? And capitalism is sort of designed that you get some winners, and it also creates a lot of losers. And Willie's one of the losers, and he's one of the guys who just couldn't make it. You're also seeing Willie as being a man who is perhaps a little too starry-eyed and too taken with the accoutrements of success, and does not kind of never. Charlie, his neighbor, at one point says to him, "Grow up. When are you going to grow up, Willie?" That happens a couple of times from Charlie. Well, I don't know if it's always in flashback, but some of the times it is. And Charlie's right, about that. Willie's a very flawed man, but he also seems to suffer a little more. It's hard not to feel for him watching this play, although he is a bit of a fool, does not always treat his family well, can be a bit abusive even verbally, and as we will learn, was also unfaithful to his very, very faithful true blue wife, Linda. And you can see why his sons, maybe don't love him as much as he wants them to. And this was also loosely sort of structured on Shakespeare's King Lear. He said Miller himself had said he had that play in mind. Lear was about unappreciative daughters. This one's about there's three of them, one appreciative and two unappreciative, and this is more designed about two sons that's again have not held up. And again, a little bit on the American Dream here, and I think there are two main strands on the American Dream. One would be, and the one Willie's obsessed with, right, is that you can come here with nothing, be nothing, and make yourself everything, right? You can be born in the log cabin and go on to become the greatest, the greatest, most important, or one of the top two, anyway, presidents we've ever had, right? Like Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln's story, you need both, right? It's great. I mean, that he was born in a lowly log cabin out in the middle of nowhere is just as important to that story as that he became the great Abraham Lincoln, right? That's what we love in this country. And that is what the country is founded on, and it's believed. That's what Walt Whitman was all often celebrating. But actually, Whitman, even more so, was celebrating the second, I think, strand of the American Dream, which basically you can come here and say what you want, do what you want. You can have a bit of elbow room, and you're not going to get thrown in the salt mines, right? It's just the freedom to be who you want, and to have and it's like a kind of a communal American Dream, right? It's the one on the Statue of Liberty. I give us you're poor, you're hungry. Everyone can kind of just find a place here, and that's also about fellowship, and that we see that in Norman Rockwell paintings, right? And those early '50s sitcoms that celebrated this world, that kind of working class utopia that was created. And it does seem that this play, again, Willie he wants to be the great man, right? But it does seem like if he didn't need that, if he could have settled for just being Willie Loman and doing what he was really good at, by the way, and we get many hints here. Willie put up a ceiling. That's a difficult, for those of you who don't know a lot about carpentry, not an easy job putting up a ceiling without help. And apparently Willie's just fine and able to do that. Fixed every crack. There's not a single crack in the plaster. He knows how to do a job and do it right when it comes to carpentry, and he's extremely handy around the house. Charlie comments later, he was a happy man with a batch of cement. And Biff, who's very, the older son and the one who's always really, knocking heads with Willie, makes a note of this too, that, he had the wrong dream. Biff is correct about that. And Biff is probably the most self-reflective and honest person in this entire play. And he sees it. And if Willie could have just been a carpenter, again, I don't think that's accidental on Miller's part. A carpenter is just, again, the best parts about being a carpenter, I think, is you make something with your hands, right? You go into work and there's something there. There's a wall there. There's a and at the end of the month or the next month, there's a house there. After you and your team get through with it, right? You bring something about in the world. There's something immensely satisfying about that. You also have a sort of team and camaraderie and fellowship, and you're all working together to be something. And you go to one another's kids' birthday parties and christenings, and you have this sort of extended clan that's like a family. And that is the thing Willie just never gets, and he can't even really, and this family, we got flashbacks, right, where it was a really happy family. What's going on? Those boys adored their father, but it doesn't end that way for Willie. And Willie just hanging on. He wanted he wanted to be the comet, right? He wasn't quite set if I think if he could have been more just who he really was and what he seemed naturally sort of gifted for, as possible, he might have had a much more satisfying and happy life and existence. But anyway, we enter this play, and again, you can kind of, it's Willie, and again, you're looking at this sort of opened, sort of, like you said, it's like a giant cutaway dollhouse to house, and he comes in, he's holding a couple of sample cases, the old sample cases. We'll get into what salesmen are. But you know what? Maybe I'll just do that now. Salesmen, once upon a time, were sort of almost aristocrats of the working class. They were men who really did sort of purely invent themselves because they would, if you're a good salesman, you could be dropped into any city in this country. That might still be somewhat true, I think, too. And within a week, you can have enough money to earn. So, boy, that's you can have enough money to like keep a roof over your head and food in your belly, even from absolutely nothing, right? That's why most good salesmen really pride themselves on that. That is kind of miraculous, and it's all about your persona and charm and your sort of the magic personality is what's gets you through there, and so again, it's sort of pure invention, and you're living by your wits. And again, that door-to-door salesman at one point had a certain amount of glamour and respect. It's sort of vanity. It's a time gone by. But anyway, and Willie, there's somebody like that in his life, right? That's what made him suddenly want to be a salesman. I think it was Dave Singelman, who earned a living in his bedroom just with his robe and his slippers, right? And when he died the death of a salesman. There's going to be two deaths of a salesman, right? And he died the death of a salesman. 200 people showed up at his funeral. He was well liked, and boy, that well liked comes back several times too. I'll circle back to that one. But again, at the end of the day, we get the second death of a salesman, which is Willie's death, because that's what Willie was a salesman, and no one but only his family and neighbor shows up to Willie's funeral. It's an empty funeral, right? So there's certainly, the salesmen aren't what they once were. But again, Willie is already, and again, he's the rat in the rat race who just can't make it. He is... he comes in, again, carrying the sample cases. You see him it would just be a silhouette in the house, and then... he's exhausted. You hear it out of his shoulders are sort of slumped, and then you hear his wife's voice from the other room. Willie? And then Willie back to her. It's all right. I came back. Willie, what happened? Did something happen, Willie? No, nothing happened. You didn't smash the car, then, did you? With casual. I said nothing happened. Didn't you hear me? Well, don't you feel well? I'm tired to the death. And there's a flute, by the way, that's been playing throughout. And we'll learn later that his father was a flute salesman. That's why, has been going, and that sort of fades away now. And he says, I couldn't make it. I just couldn't make it, Linda. And well, I got a little above Yonkers. I stopped for a cup of coffee. Maybe it was the coffee. What? I couldn't drive anymore. The car kept going off on his shoulder, Oh, maybe it was the steering again. I don't think Angela knows the Studebaker. And by the way, Studebaker is known as one of the greats, sort of like maybe how we talk about New Coke or something. That's just a disastrous car and one of the worst performing automobiles of all time. But again, he wouldn't have quite known that yet. But that's what he's driving. Now it's me. Suddenly, I realize I'm going 60 miles an hour and I don't remember the last 5 minutes. I can't seem to keep my mind to it. Maybe it's your glasses. You never went for your new glasses. I see everything fine. I came back 10 miles an hour. It took me almost 4 hours from Yonkers. Well, you'll have to rest, Willie. You can't go on this way. And that's how we begin. But again, Willie's already kind of breaking down, right? His wife's understandably worried about him. His son Biff is upstairs with Hap. I think they're grown men in their late 20s, I actually think early 30s. And sort of just coming back, Biff has been living actually out west at a cattle ranch that seems to like working outside. They're both big kids. The original actor, Lee J. Cobb, they can show a picture of him. Actually, that's in there. Hope my screen's not frozen. Was a big man, and so anyway, they're sort of strapping young men, but neither one of them has really made it, even though they both are sort of dreamers too. And again, it's not an accident there, right? That he's trying to drive it. He's sort of, we'll see him. He'll just be slipping more and more into the past and reminiscence. he really is kind of losing his mind as this play goes on, and the play starts with him not being able. He's a traveling salesman and he can no longer travel. He just can't get himself to drive, and the reason he can't get himself because his mind just keeps going off and daydreaming, and he's unsafe because he's out on the Merritt Parkway going 60 miles an hour, and he finds himself wandering off onto the road. Right. Anyway, that is how we begin. We do get, and again, we get the two sons upstairs, and Biff, who's been a kind of ne'er-do-well. He steals things for the sake of stealing things. He's got these sort of really self-destructive habits. He's actually done a little jail time because he got caught stealing some things once. And but I have to say, Biff is the one who's certainly at least taking an honest look at himself. And part of his problem is he's always wanted to live up to what his father wanted him to be, and he's never been able to do it. And what we learn a lot about Biff is in his in the flashbacks. And he was a football hero. He was a great athlete, Biff, when he was young. And his life, he's one of these guys whose life kind of peaked. These guys are never treated very well in literature, by the way, from Tom Buchanan and Gatsby to Biff here, and I'm trying to think of the main, the name of the main character in Ken on the Hot Tin Roof. I can't right now. But anyway, they're usually not, they're not treated very well by writers and old athletes. I mean, you know what? Life doesn't always treat old athletes very well, right? They're never able to recreate that amazing sort of physical excitement of their youth, and when they really mattered, they stop mattering. Biff, and we also learn though that there's a reason for this. His life peaked, and even people say that to Willie throughout, right? It seemed like his life just peaked after that game at Ebbets Field. And Ebbets Field, that would have been a big deal. He would have been the captain of his football team. He was the quarterback of the best team in the state. A very, very big deal. It really was at the time. And there's actually a great line where Willie says he's going to be the next Red Grange. And Charlie, his neighbor, sort of, oh yeah, who's Red Grange? And it was a big joke at the time because everybody knew who Red Grange was. But almost none of my students know who Red Grange is when I ask them. But I mean, I guess think Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, somebody like that. And almost everyone knows who they are, even the girl, or even, the kids who have no interest in football and know who Tom Brady is these days. And he was as well known in his day as Tom Brady is then. And athletes, again, they, chances are 50 years from now, nobody's going to give a damn about Tom Brady either. Willie, again, there's the kids are worried about, and then it's actually, I'll go on to the second, Hap, who maybe we'll revisit a little bit later. He's got his father's gift to gab. Willie is he was a somewhat talented salesman. He wasn't bad at his job, but he always just sort of self-destructed and just bad luck. Things didn't work for him. But Hap, and again, Biff has his physicality, and there's a little bit of his drive, but it's he's actually what Biff really is. Maybe he's more the natural Willie. He's discovered he likes working outside and likes working with his hands, and that's what he's going to do with the rest of his life. That's good enough for him. An honest day's work and do something physically. It soothes him, and he's sort of discovering that about himself. Hap, the other brother, as a sort of philandering, womanizing young guy who's kind of predatory, when it comes to women, and who does have his father's gift to gab. He's pretty good he's very good actually at seducing women. But we get a line from him that he's like, he's like, I have an overdeveloped sense of competition, he says, and we learn he's in a company, right, and he's not moving up the way he wants to move up. He's sort of like the assistant to the assistant manager of this sort of store, which is very little. He's gained very little, and he has a habit of sleeping with his boss's wives, which he's sort of saying, I don't know what's the matter with me, but he's sort of saying, really he's kind of bragging about it. And that is the kind of thing a loser does, right? I mean, the man who can't really cut it, he can't compete with his bosses. He's losing that competition out in the real world, and so he does these slimy, sort of sneaky things by running around, sneaking, seducing their wives behind their back, and sort of feeling, that's a dark sort of thing to do, and a very predatory thing to do. But anyway, they're all kind of worried about him, Willie, with good reason for this. Willie's appliances are also, and again, in the literature, the inner turmoil also often gets externalized, and very much, Willie's the belts are breaking, on the refrigerator. He's just. He has a great line later. It's like, just once I'd like to own something outright. I feel like I'm in a constant race with the junkyard. Oh, but this is the great line. And, just they're always, blowing their gaskets and their O-rings, just like Willie's gaskets and O-rings are sort of blowing out on him, right? And everything's sort of coming apart in his world. Willie's also has sort of an obsession with seeds. He's dying to plant something out in the backyard. He used to be able to plant things in that backyard, but a city kind of grew up around them, and their little, the little duplex they live in is sort of just sort of in constant shadow, right? For the big buildings that have gone up around them, and they can't really grow anything in the backyard anymore. And toward the end of the play, very, very scene of kind of devastating pathos. You see Willie out there at night with a flashlight, sprinkling seeds around, trying to get them to grow. And again, the seeds, his seeds are Biff and Hap, and they have not measured up. They're not doing so great. Either. But anyway, but scene, the scene, what there's really is broken down into two scenes, this play. And the first one ends with Willie in bed, his wife literally singing him a lullaby to get him to kind of settle down, go to sleep. His mind's kind of going a million miles an hour. And as he's wont to do, he sort of goes off into a sort of daydream, a fantasy. And where does he go back to? He goes right back to that last. And again, Biff won the championship that day at Ebbets Field. And again, Ebbets Field no longer exists. It was a very storied ballpark, gorgeous little jewel of a ballpark. It would be, I guess, imagine your high school championship game was played in Yankee Stadium. Think something like that. It was that big a deal. Anyway. And as Willie sort of his wife is humming him a lullaby to settle him down. We learn, by the way, that there's a hose on the boiler downstairs attached to the nipple of the boiler, and that Willie's thinking about committing suicide. So it's gotten dark here by the end of this first scene. And as he's drifting off, he just goes right back to that day when Biff was the captain of the football team. And he's like, when I give you a signal, Pop, I'm going to score a touchdown just for you. And he does. And Willie's sitting there, and again, this guy who's always wanted to be this huge success and this big deal, sitting there proud, looking at the fruit of his loins, right? His son, and the entire crowd at Ebbets Field is chanting, "Low man, low man, low man." And that's how he, still sort of dreaming of the greatness, right, that he's never going to attain, and that's how that scene ends. Now, and also they have plans the next day where Biff is supposed to go see somebody about a job that's just not going to pan out, and Willie is supposed to go in to his boss, who's actually the son of the man who had hired him and who's much younger than him. And he, of course, Willie goes in and he's supposed to be asking, he can't drive anymore, that he has to put him on the floor and keep him local. And the guy's like, well, I'm just not going to be able to do it. He goes, hey, come on, kid. And again, the son, this guy's probably 20 years plus younger than Willie is. He's the same age as Willie's sons, and he keeps calling Willie kid, like, over and over again. It's very demeaning. And Willie's sort of sitting there, and he loses his temper at one point, and the guy's sort of, you got to get it together, Willie. And I'll give you 5 minutes to get it together, and I got a meeting in the office. He gets he's got to go in there and ask for a salary. He asked for, I think, I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head. I think it was like, say, $100 a week. Then it goes down to $60, and then just $50 a week. He keeps going down. And again, this is supposed to be a salesman who's good at these things, right? And he's negotiating down and down, and then finally at the end, he's like, "Never mind, I'll just go back on the road." He gives it up altogether, and the young boss sort of stops him. "No, actually, Willie, I don't want you to work for us anymore. We've been getting complaints, and Willie, not only does he not get the not a promotion necessarily, but better working conditions, and he gone in there swearing and again he psyched himself up before this. I'm gonna get it done, Linda, right? And he doesn't. Not only does he not get that done, he doesn't even he negotiates down twice, still gets rejected, and then ends up losing his job altogether. He meets his sons. Biff, it didn't go any better where he went, where he steals The boss, the guy who owned the place, who supposedly had admired him so much, didn't even remember him. Left him sitting out there in the hallway for hours waiting to meet him, and he ends up stealing his pen, so he can't even go back. And it's a whole mess. And they meet in the. They're all supposed to meet for a big meal, celebrating their successes that day, and of course none of that happens. And what is just an unbelievably brilliant stage direction, which is maybe hard for me to do service to really right now, right here, talking about it. You've got it goes back to the original trauma of this family, which is when Biff caught Willie cheating, on his mother. What happened was Biff, who had, not been behaving very well in school, and who was extremely arrogant and rude to everyone. In school, because he was such a big deal, and everyone admired him so much as a football. All the girls liked him, all the kids wanted to be his friend, and those kids are often sort of obnoxious, right? And that's how he was. Anyway, he doesn't pass the math test. He's not going to get to go to this great football school that he wanted to go to. That was his dream, and he goes to see his dad, who he still admires so much, and he figures will be able to fix all this because he can kind of talk his way out of everything because he's Willie Long. His dad's a great salesman, and it ends up he catches him in a hotel room with a woman, and right from that point was where Biff never kind of stops. His life sort of stops right there, while all this is going on, Hap is picking up two girls for him and Biff, right? And while this is, and it ends with as they flash back into that scene where Willie betrayed their mother, the two boys actually walk off with two young ladies that they've picked up. By the way, lying to about what the Hap told them that Biff was the quarterback for the New York Giants. Hap's got he's a talented womanizer. I'll say that. And again, as they're flashing back to that moment of Willie's betrayal of their mother, the two boys, walk out of the restaurant, leaving the father confused and babbling sort of nonsensically in the toilet in the restaurant. So it was it's kind of a tough scene. And again, this is all, and the Loman brothers, and the part of the scheme was the Willie and Biff were going to be, start their own company. That he was so, and Willie was so excited about that. And we get this constantly throughout the play too, right? This trope of he's never happier than when he has something to look forward to. And again, this play really is sort of examining the kind of metaphysical underpinnings, of the American dream, and what keeps, what the things that need to be important to keep such a thing going or to make it real. And boy, an obsession with the better tomorrow is the ultimate of that. And Willie just clings onto that like a security blanket, right? And he's just having more and more trouble doing that as the play goes on. We do get these flashbacks with Ben. Where is? Hang on. Oh, here. See if I can find where it was. 1 second. Sorry, guys. I don't know where I put that. Don't worry about it. Sorry about that. And at the end, he has again, he has his brother Ben. Again, probably named after Ben Franklin, the original sort of a American self-made man. I mean, the autobiography of Ben Franklin is a very important document to the perhaps the foundational document, along with maybe the pursuit of maybe the foundation as far as the American self-made man is concerned. And there's plenty of literature on this, but I think that might be the foundational document of it. And of course, Ben Franklin, the son of a printer who kind of becomes this great important man and signer of and one of the editors even of Thomas Jefferson, no less, of the Declaration of Independence. And anyway, his brother Ben was this guy who went into the jungle. Again, we get this Darwinistic sort of survival of the fittest, but he's the survivor. He's the guy who he went into the diamond mines at 19, came out at 20 or 21 or something like that. It was a millionaire because he discovered a diamond mine. But we also learned some disturbing things about Ben, that he's sort of he can be kind of a vicious guy, and maybe that's how he got his money, and maybe you have to sell your soul, perhaps, or at least Ben seems to have done it. And he really does seem to not have any of the things that we admire about human beings, which essentially involves caring for other people of it. But anyway, but Willie throughout this has been sort of talking to his brother Ben in his head, because his brother Ben only came and saw him once, left, and he never heard from him again. And he's dead now, so he's certainly not talking to him now. But his ghost haunts this play, and he's sitting there, and now at the end, he doesn't know what to do. He's got this last sort of get-rich-quick scheme where he's going to hopefully take care of his boys, his sons, and because he has life insurance. And it's $20,000. And damn it, it's $20,000 or $25,000, something like that. And that's something he feels like he could stake his boys, and he didn't make it. But damn it, his kids are going to, right? And they can go start their business with the money. He's going to sacrifice himself for his children. Of course, he's wrong about that, too, because, if you know anything about life insurance, it doesn't pay off if you commit suicide. So it negates the policy. So he's wrong, but he's talking, but Ben, the ghost of Ben doesn't know this, and he doesn't know this. And he's like, Ben, he's like, they'll call you a coward, William. He's talking to him, he's like, and then he has this sad line where he goes, "Is it really, what is it more heroic to just keep being here, ringing up zero?" And, it's just your heart just fucking breaks for him. And he eventually, and again the whole time, the earlier flashbacks with he and Ben, he's constantly, "Hey Ben, look at this. Could you teach me something?" And Ben's never all that interested in him. He's always sort of talking about himself. He's very self-absorbed. He's aloof. Kind of, I have a train to catch, and he kind of walks off. He's never really, but on this one, he actually convinces him, and finally convinces his beloved and much admired brother Ben. They say, "Well, $20,000 means something. That's something you can hold in your hand," and he wins his arguments, and it does end. You have this kind of terrible sort of final clash with the son and the father. Biff breaks down crying, and Biff is just going to go away. They can't, and it's really tragic. And they're just these two men who really love each other are not going to be able to stay. And Biff is actually promising to go away and not come back anymore. The mother is even, I'm kind of siding with Biff on that. Kind of a hard thing for a mother to, I would think, to do. But Linda always seems to be siding with Will over the boys, which is, a little bit of an odd kind of quirk in this in her character. And anyway, they finally sort of go to bed, and but then a few minutes later they hear that Willie has gone out got in the car, and they're going out trying to stop him. You sort of hear the wheels screeching in a loud crash, and Willie does commit suicide in his car by crashing his car into a tree or something. And the last scene, is at the graveyard. It is, if you've gone through all this, bit of a crushing one, really, to watch. And again, the death of a salesman. This isn't like the death of the Dave Singelman, the salesman, where he had all 200 plus people showing up there, and sort of a hero's funeral almost. Now almost no one shows up. Linda wonders why no one showed up. It's a very depressed. Boy, I remember when I saw this play, and after the curtain fell, God, I wandered around with a blue funk for a long time. After this, it really kind of just stuck to my ribs for days after. This was a tough one. I found it a tough one to watch anyway. But at the end here, you do get Charlie, who's been so good to him. And you do get the neighbors, Charlie and Bernard, who I haven't gotten too much into here, but suffice it to say, Charlie just sort of plugged along and did his business. Bernard studied in school, tried to help Biff, who didn't listen to him back then. And Charlie is, as we learned, about to argue a case before the Supreme Court. He is going out to great heights as a lawyer. He's going somewhere to play tennis. He had to bring a tennis club because the people he's going to stay with for a few days have their own tennis courts. So you see that, he's made it, right? right? The kind of people he's hanging around with. And again, arguing a case between before the Supreme Court, if you're a lawyer, is a little bit like taking center field for the New York Yankees if you're a ball boy, right? I mean, it doesn't get higher than that. So he's made the grade. Charlie's done well. Charlie's been not only done well, but he's kind of been taking care of Willie and been such a good neighbor and a friend to him. But anyway, Charlie gives a sort of little eulogy at the at the graveyard. They're all, I mean, Hap is angry. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do that. We would have helped him. Biff is, he had the wrong dreams. He just had the wrong dream. And then he goes on how happy he was whenever he was working on the house, and that's what he should have been, was a carpenter or a bricklayer or something. And anyway, Charlie sort of comes in at the end here, and he says, nobody das blame this man. You don't understand. Willie was a salesman, and for a salesman, there is no rock bottom to the life. He don't put a bolt to a nut, and he don't tell you the law, and he don't give medicine. He's a man way out there in the blue, riding on a smile on a shoe shine. And when they start not smiling back, that's an earthquake. And then you get yourself a couple of spots in your head, and you're finished. Nobody does blame this man. A salesman's got the dream boy. Comes with the territory. Just beautiful and just achingly sad. Fine lines about poor Willie. And then, it's just and Linda wants a few minutes alone. They all, kind of go off, and the play does end with just Linda kneeling before Willie's grave. And she's sitting there talking to him. She says, "Forgive me, dear, I can't cry. I don't know what it is, but I can't cry. I don't understand it. Why did you ever do that? Help me, Willie. I can't cry. It seems to me that you're just on another trip. I keep expecting you, Willie, dear. I can't cry. Why did you do it? I search and I search and I can't understand it, Willie. I made the last payment on the house today, and that's been a theme throughout they mentioned it earlier that he was just about to be paid off and own his house outright. I just made the last payment today. Today, dear. And there'll be nobody home." A sob rises in her throat, and we're free and clear. We're free. And that's how the play ends. The curtain drops, and so ends the sad plight of Willie Loman. Okay.